Hello, guys. Welcome back to the MMA Sucker Podcast. My name is Frazer Krohn. Plenty to talk about from a very interesting and controversial week of MMA in the UFC. As we know now, UFC Noche is one for the books. And there's plenty to talk about. There's three main fights that I want to sort of focus on. But there was a lot of good performances throughout the card from top to bottom. What I would say is that there's certainly talking points around this, and I think we'll get a lot more clarity once the week progresses and once we get the fighters talking a little bit more. But we have the main event, obviously, the controversy around the scoring that I'll go on to talk about. We have the co-main event, and there's a very interesting discussion point that MMA Suckers Andrew Harbour suggested for me to discuss, which I'll go on to talk about a little bit later on. And we've got Raul Rosas's performance. To be honest, 54 seconds is not an awful lot I can talk about the performance itself. But there was just, like I say, there's a lot of good performances up and down the card. So I'll go on to touch on all of them. But we have to start at the top. We have to start at the controversial scoring of Alexa Grasso versus Valentina Shevchenko. Of course, as we know now, it ended in a split draw. We had one judge score it in favor of Valentina, one judge score it in favor of Sal D'Amato scored it in favor of Alexa Grasso. And then we've got Mike Bell's card at 47-47. The controversy comes as Mike Bell scored the final round, a 10-8 for Alexa Grasso. Now, I watched the fight, not knowing the result, of course. And then I've gone back this morning, getting in the kilometers at the gym on the treadmill, watched the fight. So I could, I did nothing but concentrate on that fifth round. I only watched the fifth round back. I didn't watch 1, 2, 3, and 4 because I think for me, they were fairly simple to score. I think round 1 and round 3 were Shevchenko's, round 2 and round 4 were for Grasso. And it came down for me to that fifth round. And I do think Alexa Grasso won the round. But for me, she did not win that round at 10-8. Now, what's important is that, we have to consider what Mike Bell saw in that fifth round. Now, UFCstats.com have the stats as 43 strikes landed by Alexa Grasso, 41 landed by Valentina Shevchenko. Now, when I was watching the fight back, we had the first 3 minutes of round 5. So even if we don't consider anything that happened in rounds 1 to 4, just scoring round 5, which is exactly how you should be scoring in MMA. You can't think, well, she did damage in round 4, so she might have edged out round 5. That's not, we can't do that. We have to score each round individually as its individual 5 minutes on its own. For me, that is never a 10. I mean, that is just never a 10-8 round, in my opinion. Never. I think round 2, there's a better shout for a 10-8 round. I think to a degree, even round 4 is a better shout for a 10-8 round. And then round 5, neither of those, round 2 or round 4 for me, in favor of Alexa Grasso, are 10-8 rounds. They're not. But I think, with the knockdown in round 2 and I think was it the series of pretty brutal knees in rounds, I can't remember, 3 or 4. I can't remember exactly, or 2, 3 or 4. I can't remember exactly. After Valentina tried to, she tried to use a bit of gamesmanship and drag her hand across the floor, and Alexa Grasso, there was no weight going through that hand. She landed legal knees to the head. They are damaging shots, but it's still not a 10-8 for me. Now, so we go and we have to look at the fifth round. Now, that fifth round, for me, Alexa Grasso wins around 10-9. And the reason for that is because of the way the round ended and ultimately the fight ended. What I would say is important about that final round is that Valentina, through the first 3 minutes, did a lot of damage on Alexa Grasso. A lot of damage. But we also have to discuss the damage that Alexa Grasso did on Valentina. The first 3 minutes were played out pretty much on the feet. And if I could show you video analysis, I really, really would, but I don't want to, I can't for copyright purposes. However, trust me when I say the first 3 minutes was played out completely on the feet. Valentina was landing the better counters, the quicker counters. Alexa Grasso did land a good 1-2 early, the first exchange of the fifth round. In the first sort of 20 seconds of the fifth round, she landed a good 1-2. Valentina was punishing Alexa Grasso with leg kicks like she did throughout the fight. She was landing that jab a lot, and it produced quite a sizable cut on the. I think it would have been the left hand side of Alexa Grasso's face. That's a damaging shot, even though it's just a jab. It's doing damage. It's doing visible damage. So, with 3 minutes gone in the final round, Alexa Grasso needs a finish, and Valentina Shevchenko is winning the fight. He's winning that round, and therefore, for me, 2-2 going into the final one, he's winning that round. She goes for the sort of head and arm toss, sort of hip toss, and it doesn't work. We've got to then talk about Shevchenko. Why did she go for that? We've seen it many a time work for the likes of Ronda Rousey against Alexis Davis when she knocked her out pretty much knocked her out with a slam in 16 seconds. But we've also seen it plenty of times where fighters have gone for the hip toss and then the fighter like Alexa Grasso did on Saturday night slip out the back and get the back as she did. But what I would say is that the ground and pound that Alexa Grasso landed, they were not damaging shots for the most part. They were mostly sort of arm to elbow punches. They weren't landing with any great power. It wasn't rocking Valentina Shevchenko. Valentina Shevchenko was not having her head. Yes, she was covering up. Of course she was. She's all 23 minutes into a 25-minute fight. She's tired. She's just been taken down. She's got the pressure of Alexa Grasso, on her back, and she is landing ground and pound on her. But they weren't big damaging shots. They weren't rocking the head back of Valentina Shevchenko. But they were landing. They were damaging Shevchenko, but they weren't, ferocious ground and pound where every single shot landed and it bloodied Valentina and it cut her up, and there was chances where the referee could have stepped in for that ground and pound. If she would have hit Valentina for the full 5 minutes of that kind of ground and pound, I don't think the referee would have stood in. She then did posture up into a bit more of an advantageous position. This is Alexa Grasso, and did land some damaging shots, but a lot of them were blocked by Valentina Shevchenko. UFC stats has her landing just one ground and pound strike in that final round, which I didn't see that. I thought far more land, but for me it wasn't as damaging as maybe it seemed. What I would say is that the submission attempt in the final round, did that? How much of that? Was it deep? Did she try? Did she go for the? Was she looking for a fight-ending scenario? I mean, I guess she had the rear naked choke in, but Valentina had the rear naked choke in the third round and dominated that round. It's as much a 10-8 in the third for Valentina as it is in the fifth for Alexa Grasso, in my opinion. So then we go to the judges' scorecards, and as I said, the controversial scorecard is Mike Bell at 10-8 in that fifth round. For me, like I said, I thought it was a 10-9 in favor of Alexa Grasso. It's never a 10-8. And I believe if Mike Bell would have scored that fight a 10-8 in favor, a 10-9, sorry, in favor of Alexa Grasso, I mean, let me just do the maths quickly. He scored it a 47-47. If he would have scored that a 10-9, Valentina would have won and would have defeated the champion and regained the belt that she lost to Alexa Grasso last time out. But that wasn't the case. It's really frustrating for me because it was such a good fight. Both women put on an absolute show for the fans, and after a really good night of showcasing Mexican MMA. And Valentina kind of called it out. She kind of called out Mike Bell, not directly, but said, I think the judges were maybe influenced by the crowd, or she essentially said that they were under pressure to score the fight in favor of the Mexican fighter. And it's really, really difficult to watch that fight, see that that last round was a 10-8, when that is exactly the scorecard that Alexa Grasso needed. And to claim that, you know, Mike Bell wasn't influenced by the Mexican fans, wasn't influenced by the, you know, encouraged to sort of score it in favor of the Mexican fighter. I don't like to use the word corruption, but this is exactly what is the problem with boxing. You know, there is a problem in boxing with corruption. That's a fact. There's no doubt about that. And now, you know, we're beginning to potentially see a problem in MMA with corruption. Now, I don't want to, like I say, I don't want to say that boxing is corrupt, and sorry, that the MMA is corrupt, and that the Mike Bell scored that in favor of Alexa Grasso because she's Mexican, because she put in a phenomenal performance, a really, really good performance. And she did, you know, for me, I'll go on to talk in a second about what's next. But Valentina, you know, in the post-fight press conference, obviously we saw that she'd hurt a thumb, but she feels like, you know, the event taking place on Mexican Independence Day influenced the 10-8 scorecard in the final round. It's hard to argue that. You know, it's a terrible scorecard, and for me, it's just not the. I didn't see a 10-8. I did not see a 10-8 round in that final round. But I didn't see a 10-8 round in any of the rounds between Valentina Shevchenko and Alexa Grasso. Verdict had it narrowly in favor of Valentina Shevchenko for what it's worth. You know, clear round 1 for Valentina, clear round 2 for Alexa Grasso, clear round 3 for Shevchenko. Round 4 they actually had a draw, 9.51 each, but that, you know, slightly goes in favor of Shevchenko for some reason. I'm not quite sure why that is. Oh no, sorry. That round 4 they had down as a draw, and then round 5 they had down as Alexa Grasso. But the bigger win in round 3 sort of went in favor of Shevchenko ever so narrowly. One of the closest verdict scorecards of all time. That, you know, they said that themselves. It was, you know, it was a really good performance from both women. And it's a shame that we now have to talk about, you know, corruption in MMA, you know, dodgy scorecards, because it was a really good performance by both women. And now we have to look at what's next. For me, I don't want to see a trilogy. I think across best part of 9 rounds, Valentina Shevchenko has not shown that she is the better fighter over Alexa Grasso across 9 rounds, across pretty much 2 fights. She was finished in the first, and I thought that she actually lost this one as well. For me, I want the division to move on. You know, let's not forget that Valentina Shevchenko is one of the best. Well, she is the flyweight GOAT at the moment. You know, there's no, that's unquestionable. But maybe it's just Alexa Grasso has got a number, just like Chris Weidman had Anderson Silva's number, just like, you know, John Jones had Daniel Cormier's number, just how Rose Namajunas seems to have Zhang Weili's number, how Rose had Joanna's number. You know, these things happen. Alexa Grasso maybe is just a terrible matchup for Valentina Shevchenko. But now the division for me has to move on. The next fight I want to see Alexa Grasso in, and this works phenomenally because all of these women in the flyweight division competed pretty recently, within the past month or so that all of these women will be ready to compete around the same time again. I want to see Alexa Grasso versus Manon Fiorot, and I truly believe that Fiorot has deserved the shot at Alexa Grasso. For me, she's the clear next contender. She might not be the number 1 contender because that would probably be reserved for Valentina Shevchenko, but I really want to see Manon Fiorot in a title shot against Alexa Grasso next. And on the undercard, as the co-main event, for me, that's a pay-per-view main event. You've got the Mexican fans, you've got the French fans. Both of them can come out and you know, enjoy that fight for what it is. I think it'll be a really, really good stand-up battle. And on the co-main event, I want to see Valentina Shevchenko versus Erin Blanchfield. why not? Erin Blanchfield is more than deserving of a title shot. I just think Manon Fiorot is slightly more deserving of a title shot than Erin Blanchfield. The UFC chose to go down the route of giving Erin Blanchfield the shot and having Manon Fiorot versus Valentina Shevchenko. Sign me up for that as well. That I genuinely believe that there is at least two more title contenders before Valentina should get a third shot at Alexa Grasso, assuming that Grasso gets through. But not assuming, but let's just predict that Alexa Grasso gets through Manon Fiorot and Erin Blanchfield. Then maybe Valentina, if she picks up another win or two, can have that third shot at Alexa Grasso. But for me, Manon Fiorot and Erin Blanchfield, at this point in time, need to test themselves against Alexa Grasso. And that might be a controversial view, but I just don't have a great interest in seeing Shevchenko versus Grasso 3, because like I say, I think across 2 fights and across the best part of 9 rounds, Shevchenko hasn't shown that she's clearly better than Alexa Grasso. And Grasso deserves to face someone new. Of course, she was always going to rematch Shevchenko after that first fight, because Shevchenko's a long-time champion. Just like I think we'll see, just like we saw, Usman rematch Rocky Edwards, Max Holloway rematch Volkanovski. I genuinely do think that we'll see a rematch between. I generally don't think that we need to see a rematch between Alexa Grasso and Valentina Shevchenko for a third time, a trilogy fight. I don't think that's necessary. But what a good fight it was. There was 5 performance bonuses handed out. That didn't get fight of the night, although I'm really not quite sure how it didn't, because it was a really good fight. Another fight, the co-main event, Della Maddalena defeated Kevin Holland by split decision. So that's back-to-back split decisions in the co-main and main events. This one for me was quite a tough watch. I didn't find this fight all that entertaining, and I won't go back and watch it. It was difficult. Kevin Holland didn't use his length as well as I thought maybe he would, and it wasn't as defensively sound as I thought he maybe should have been. And I think if he was more defensively sound, he would have done a lot better in this fight. Now, he tried to overwhelm Jack Della Maddalena with volume. In the first round, he threw 111 shots. In the second round, he threw 127. And in the third round, he threw 118. So all in and around the same, over 110 shots thrown, under 130. So he had similar output from round 1 to round 3. For Della Maddalena, it was the significant shots that landed and the accuracy of the shots that landed. His accuracy was far, far higher than Kevin Holland's. Kevin Holland landed at about a 36%, 38%, and 32% clip. Maddalena, 59% in that first round. He only threw 69 strikes, but landed 41 of them. So he landed more strikes than Kevin Holland in the first round, but threw almost half the amount of strikes. In that second round, Kevin Holland did outland him. He outlanded him 49 strikes to Kevin Holland, 34 to Jack Della Maddalena. And again, in the third round, 38 landed by Holland, 30 landed by Della Maddalena. But Maddalena was throwing a lot less. And the strikes that he did land did seem to be having a much more significant impact on Kevin Holland. Now, visually, Kevin Holland has a style, and we saw it and we spoke about it in great detail last week with Sean Strickland. I'll link the article below. I'll link the article below that I wrote last week about how Adesanya's accuracy was all the way down, and that was arguably because of the Philly shell style of Sean Strickland. Now, Kevin Holland also kind of uses that Philly shell style, as does Bobby Green, but Kevin Holland, for me, he's very light on his feet, and he's always using footwork. It's almost like a karate stance with that Philly shell. He takes a lot of shots just sort of grazing off the shoulder. But visually, for a judge, it might look like these shots are landing or having an impact on him because he's backing up all the time. So when Della Maddalena comes through with a few strikes, Kevin Holland backs all the way out, shoulders up, and these shots do slide off his shoulders. Visually, that's not great for the judges, because they maybe see that as these shots having an impact on Holland, forcing him backwards, whereas it's just his defensive nous to sort of get out of the way, as it were. With Maddalena, he is very much a stand there and, take shots on the guard, take shots on his forearms, on his shoulders, on his elbows. And I think that's why, he does use footwork. Of course, he uses footwork. You can't get to the level that he is in the UFC without having, really good footwork. But he does take a lot more shots on the guard than Kevin Holland does. Brief. I don't think that like I said, I don't think it was the most entertaining fight. There's a little bit of talking between the two guys, which did make it a little bit more entertaining. But then but then apparently Della Maddalena had to remind Kevin Holland they were in a fight and they weren't, like a spar where they're just talking to each other. For me, Kevin Holland doesn't take a massive step back. He probably stays in and around the top 15, of course. Jack Della Maddalena. I mean, they'll probably swap places. Kevin Holland was 13th. Della Maddalena was 14th. They'll swap places. For Della Maddalena, next, I want to see him. I want to see that rematch. Well, I want to see the fight rescheduled with Sean Brady. Sean Brady was obviously meant to fight Della Maddalena when Della Maddalena fought Basil Haseeb. I want to see that one rebooked because that's the fight to make for me. But for me as well, this also opens up a whole new discussion point, and this is what Andrew suggested that I sort of discuss on the pod, and I do want to touch on it for a little bit. He simply asked, what career path is worth pursuing? The Donald Cerrone, Kevin Holland sort of money train, the hard way, or the more methodical approach that guards a lasting legacy, GSP and so many others. And for me, how I've interpreted that, so apologies, Andrew, if I'm reading it wrong, but what he's trying to say is what works best, the sort of method of taking fight after fight after fight after fight, staying very, very active and, fighting and winning 2 and losing 2 and then winning 1 and losing 3 and then going on a 3 or 4 fight winning streak, headlining and then losing again. Is that the way that, what's more beneficial for a fighter? Or is it the picking and choosing who you're going to fight, fighting 2 or 3 times a year, but each fight has a logical next step up and the next step up and the next step up, and which career is worth pursuing more? And it for me, it's a fascinating topic to discuss. But what I will say is that it all depends on the fighters themselves. Kevin Holland knows deep down that he's never going to be a UFC champion. He's got a record of 25, 10, no draws, and a single no contest against Daukaus a couple of years ago. Now, what I'll say is Kevin Holland in 2023 has already had 3 fights. He'll probably have a 4th, and he's 2-1 in 2023. 2 finishes over Santiago Ponzinibbio, Michael Chiesa, and then obviously the loss to Jack Della Maddalena this past weekend. 2022, he had 4 fights and he went 2-2, although one of them was that Khamzat Chimaev fight. 2021, he had 3 fights, all of them losses. That was up at middleweight, and of course, 2020 he was the man of the hour, as it were. 5 fights: May, August, September, October, and December. I'll just pull up Donald Cerrone's record because I haven't got it to hand. Donald Cerrone was known as the anytime, anywhere kind of guy. But then he kind of, you have to consider, Donald Cerrone competed 3 times in 2018, 2 main events in 2019, competed 3 times at one main event. Sorry, competed 4 times in 2019, 2 main events. 2020 competed 3 times. 2021 once. 2022 once, and obviously, he was without a win for the last time he won was Iaquinta in 2019. He lost to Ferguson, Gaethje, McGregor, Pettis, no contest with Nico Price. It was originally a draw, but Price tested positive for marijuana, lost to Alex Morono and then Jim Miller. But, he was known as the anytime, anywhere kind of guy, Donald Cerrone. Nathaniel Wood, obviously, as we know, stepping in on fairly short notice, been announced. He competed in July in London, and he'll compete on UFC 294 as well, stepping in on fairly short notice against Mohamed Narimov. Each their own. And you do get these guys and girls that do, jump in anytime, anywhere. I will fight anybody at any time and it doesn't matter where on how has gloves will travel kind of thing. For me, it's a difficult one because, like I say, do you want to be a UFC champion? And if you do, I mean, McGregor is a great example of this, and I don't like to hark back to McGregor being a great role model, but he took on all comers, and regardless of, I know now he's a little, well, I mean, he's a lot more um sort of tactical with who he faces, but you can't deny that in his early career, and maybe this is the career path that many should follow. In your early UFC career, get as many fights as you can under your belt. Offer to step in on late notice. If someone pulls out, accept the fight with somebody new, because these opportunities might not come along all that often. So just taking a look at McGregor's career, he competed in the August of 2013, and then he was scheduled to fight Andy Ogle. Andy Ogle pulled out and he fought Max Holloway. He was then scheduled to fight Cole Miller. Cole Miller pulled out and he fought Diego Brandao. He was obviously then meant to fight Jose Aldo. Jose Aldo pulled out and he fought Chad Mendes. He was then supposed to fight Rafael Dos Anjos. Dos Anjos pulled out and he fought Nate Diaz. And since then, he hasn't had an opponent pull out on him and whatnot. But what made McGregor so big and such a big star is that Andy Ogle pulled out, doesn't matter, I'll face Max Holloway. Cole Miller pulled out, doesn't matter, I'll face Diego Brandao. Jose Aldo pulls out, okay, doesn't matter, I'll face Chad Mendes. RDA pulls out, doesn't matter, I'll face Nate Diaz, but I'll face him upper weight at welterweight. Of course, that didn't pay off for McGregor, and he lost that fight at UFC 196. But he took the risk, and with no risk, there's no reward. McGregor was already a massive megastar by the time that he fought Jose Aldo. And I think the loss to Nate Diaz made him an even bigger star, because he can say, look, it was up at welterweight. I hadn't trained for it. I was training for Rafael Dos Anjos. Him and Nate Diaz are a very different style. I still, from a personal perspective, still would love to see that Rafael Dos Anjos fight, but don't think we'll get it anytime soon. But for me, he's kind of put himself in the shot window to be a fan favorite. As does Donald Cerrone, fan favorite, always stepping in there on short notice to face guys and girls. Kevin Holland always stepping up to it. I mean, Kevin Holland stepping up to face Khamzat Chimaev on 24 hours notice. No one was doing that. And it makes these fighters so entertaining. But I think the realization is that the more fights you have at a higher level, you're not getting better. Training camp is where you get better. And these guys aren't having a full training camp for these fights. Donald Cerrone was not getting better in between fights. Kevin Holland isn't getting better between fights until he took a prolonged period of time off, dropped down the weight. He lost to Derek Brunson, he lost to Marvin Vettori. He then returned against Carl Daukaus. For me, that was a prolonged period of time out for Kevin Holland. Then from Carl Daukaus to Alex Oliveira, prolonged period of time out. Then he jumped in there. I think he was just better than Tim Means. Then he didn't take much time and he fought Khamzat, of course, on short notice. Then he fought Stephen Thompson. Again, that was a strange one that seemed to come about quite quickly. The last time he fought was in July on the Poirier Gaethje 2 undercard. Now, just looking at all the fighters that fought on that main card, aside from Kevin Holland, none of them have fought again since, and none of them are even booked to fight since. Roman Kopylov on the undercard of that fight night, that pay-per-view, obviously fought again this weekend as well. So it's a quick turnaround for him. But none of the top guys on that card, Gaethje, Poirier, Pereira, Blachowicz, Derek Lewis, Marco Rodriguez de Lima, Bobby Ferguson's fighting in a couple of weeks, but he's again someone that steps in there at late notice against the likes of Islam Makhachev. He doesn't care for Bobby Green. Is that the best way to win a UFC world title? I don't think it is the best way. That you cannot do that for a prolonged period of time over your career and constantly take on new opponent after new opponent after new opponent. McGregor did it, but then towards the end of his career, now that he is an established world champion, at the time, he can't do it anymore. Now you flip that on its head and you go down the Khabib Nurmagomedov route, or the Sean O'Malley route of picking, essentially hand-picking opponents. Sean O'Malley's had one of the greatest rises in MMA history. But you can't say that he's fought a who's who of the division. I think he's got 2 wins over guys in the top 10, one of them being Aljamain Sterling. You look at Khabib's record, he was, 4-0 in the UFC, and then he had a cancelled fight. Then he took on RDA. Then he had a cancelled fight against Donald Cerrone because he was injured. Another cancelled fight against Donald Cerrone because he was injured. A cancelled fight against Tony Ferguson because he was injured. Then Ferguson got injured, another cancelled fight. Then Nurmagomedov got injured, another cancelled fight. Ferguson got injured again, another cancelled fight. Ferguson got injured, and then the fight was cancelled due to coronavirus. Khabib would never fight. I don't think he'd take a real risk on short notice. Maybe I'm wrong, and get in the comments and tell me that I'm wrong. He fought Darrell Horcher on short notice once. Darrell Horcher was a UFC newcomer, and with the greatest respect, since then has not exactly made a great name for himself. Darrell Horcher is what he is. Sean O'Malley quite literally picked and chose opponents until he made it to the top. GSP didn't ever take a number of huge risks in his career as far as taking fights on short notice. We've also got to consider John Jones. John Jones did not take fights on short notice. He took some fights on short notice, yes, but when he was offered Dan Henderson on short notice when Chael Sonnen pulled out the fight, he said, no, I don't want to take that fight. And now look at John Jones. He's the pound for pound the greatest in the sport. He's the UFC heavyweight champion. He's undefeated. Let's not pretend that John Jones is to be sort of that was the wrong decision. And that event did get cancelled. It's a real disappointment. But did he make the right decision? Yeah, probably, because now look at him. What I would say is that it depends on the career that you want, and thank you to Andrew for the sort of discussion header. And guys, get in the comments below, let me know what you think about this. Should fighters follow the sort of Kevin Holland, Donald Cerrone kind of view on fighting every couple of months, or should they go down the Sean O'Malley or the Khabib Nurmagomedov, John Jones route of not fighting so often, but being very much more tactical? And of course, guys, give me discussion topics in the section in the comments below as well, because evidence, I'll discuss them. I'll wax lyrical on them for a while. The last fight I just want to touch on really briefly: Raul Rosas Jr. knocks out TKO's Terrence Mitchell in 54 seconds. He obviously knocked him down and froze Mitchell. Did we learn an awful lot from this fight? We learned that he has got some hands. Obviously, he barely threw a shot. He threw 9 times as many, he landed 9 times as many punches in this one as he did in his second UFC fight, in that UFC loss against Christian Rodriguez. And that fight went 15 minutes. This fight went just 54 seconds. Raul Rosas Jr., can really hone in and he's still only 18 years old. If he can really hone in on using his hands to set up his ground game, because he's still a ground game specialist. If he can use those hands to set up his ground game, he's got a massive future in the sport anyway, but he's got a massive future in the sport if he can really get his boxing to be as good as his ground game. Elsewhere on the card, Tracy Cortez returned to action and won, and it was good. Tracy Cortez did what she did. She kept it standing. I maybe expected to wrestle in this one. She didn't. Lupi Godinez, just dominant, just dominated Elise Reed. She had no business being in there with Godinez. Josephine Knutston, made a UFC debut and again dominated the fight. Significant strikes, 81-8, 3 takedowns out of 4 landed, just dominated the fight on top. We had Roman Kopylov, like I said earlier, get the victory, and so that was the fight night that was Mexican Independence Day, and I'm predicting that they do sort of go back to do a lot of more shows on Mexican Independence Day. this time next year in September. You know, Canelo will have to wait. But now we have to look ahead to what's next this weekend. We've got Bellator card. Bellator returns. I've got a preview coming out on the site that I'll post up on the socials. Preview of this card. Headlining the card: Johnny Eblen versus Fabian Edwards for the middleweight title. Really good competitive bout. Edwards, of course, riding so much momentum off the back of Leon capturing the belt, and I think he's on a 3-fight winning streak over respectable guys in Lyoto Machida, Charlie Warden, obviously last time out against Gegard Mousasi. Johnny Eblen, however, is potentially the best middleweight in the world, regardless of promotion. He's really, really good. He's a really good wrestler. And I think this one is going to be a fascinating fight. In the co-main event, you got Aaron Pico making his Bellator return after that shoulder injury. I think it was that was his last fight. I'll double check that. Oh no, so he got the shoulder injury at the end of last year, and then in April he returned to beat James Gonzalez by decision. He takes on Pedro Carvalho. Let's not forget, guys, this is in Dublin, Ireland. So this is an SBG card, let's be honest. Pedro Carvalho obviously competes out of SBG Ireland, as does Sinead Kavanagh, who's on this card, against Sarah Collins. Collins does, no business being in there with a former title challenger in Sinead Kavanagh. You got Mance Burnell versus Daniel Welsh, that should be a decent fight at 145 pounds. Sabah Homasi competes on this one. Brian Moore. I think we've got Peter Queally, who will come out to, of course, Zombie, as we all know. Charlie Ward, Kieran Clark, and Magomed Sharapov, Zabit's younger brother, 8-0 in the UFC. In MMA, supposedly opening up the card, which I can't see that he'll actually do, because he's a massive star, and he has a lot of potential at least. He was supposed to be facing Martin McDonough. McDonough's been replaced with Piotr Niedzieliński, a Polish fighter. I can't lie, I haven't heard of before, but he's 1-2 in Bellator at the moment. We also have a UFC card this weekend. I believe we're back in the Apex, which I really cannot understand. We are back in the Apex for a card that has a lot of big name value, to be honest. You've got Mizuki Inoue versus Hannah Goldie. You've got Mohammed Usman going to knock out Jake Collier. You've got Jacob Malkoun versus Cody Brundage. You've got Andre Fiallo versus Tim Means. You've got Charles Jourdain versus Ricardo Ramos. These are all really good fights. Brian Battle versus AJ Fletcher. And then you get up to the three sort of, not three headline fights, but the three sort of feature fights. Marina Rodriguez versus Michelle Waterson Gomez. Marina Rodriguez, my female fighter of the year a couple of years ago. But she is on the back of 2 losses. She lost to Amanda Lemos, and then she lost to Jandiroba. Michelle Waterson Gomez, how long is she going to keep fighting? She's 18-11. She's 37 years old. She's without a win since 2020. She hasn't put back-to-back wins together since she won 1 in 2018 and 1 in 2019. She's lost 5 of her last 6. Fair play, Michelle Waterson Gomez. She's a recognisable face in the sport, but it might be time to hang it up. We've got the return of Bryce Mitchell, which is extremely exciting, because let's not forget he was supposed to fight Masvar Ivalev at UFC 288, and he had that back injury on fight week. He returned to face Dan Ige. Obviously, Bryce Mitchell's last fight, he was beaten pretty badly by Ilia Topuria. Dan Ige returned in a big way after 3 straight losses against Damon Jackson in January, and then in June defeated Nate Landwehr by decision. That was a great fight. And then we got the main event, an absolutely blockbuster lightweight bout between Rafael Fiziev and Mateusz Gamrot. Now, this is your classic striker versus grappler fight. You got Fiziev coming off a loss to Justin Gaethje in London in March or July, I think that was. Was that the July card or the March card? I think it was the March card, wasn't it? Yeah, the March card. And you got Mateusz Gamrot. He obviously was coming off the loss to Beneil Dariush, and then jumped in there with Jalen Turner. I think that was a short notice fight when Dan Hooker pulled out against Jalen Turner. we know what's going to happen in this fight. If the stats tell you exactly what you need to know. As you guys can probably tell, I'm really into my stats. Takedown average per 15 minutes, 0.31 for Rafael Fiziev, 4.54 for Mateusz Gamrot. With that being said, the takedown defense of Rafael Fiziev is 90%. 90% takedown defense. What I think might play against Fiziev in this one is that he has a tendency to be flashy with avoiding strikes. So strikes come at his face and he'll lean back from the hips in that Muay Thai style, exposing his hips for Mateusz Gamrot to shoot on, get the takedown, take him down to the ground. The winner of this positions himself extremely, extremely well in the lightweight division. Let me just pull up the rankings here real quick. So you've got, it's number 7 versus number 6. The winner really probably steps into that top 5, although I don't think they'll want to kick Michael Chandler out of that top 5 on the back of a potential McGregor fight. But, the winner of this one really positions himself well in the division. And I'm excited for it. I think it'll be a really good fight. It's going to be high pace. It's going to be entertaining. It's striker versus grappler, which is exactly what we like to see. It's going to be competitive for potentially for as long as it lasts. It might not last a full 25 minutes, but tune in next week, guys. I'll be breaking that down. I'll be breaking down the other fights. I'll be looking at the Bellator card as well. I'll be looking ahead to next week's UFC card as well. And we'll be going live on the site if any big news drops. Jeremy's constantly dropping videos on YouTube with any of the big news. We've got UFC 5 coming out soon as well, so I'll drop a video on that. And hopefully we'll get a few interviews up on the site as well. So keep it locked to MMA Sucker. My name's Frazer Krohn. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you next time.